She was pregnant, but no one knew who the father was. In a small, forgotten town where whispers carried more weight than confessions, a child was born unlike any other, the most inbred child ever recorded in American history. This is not a tale of mere genetics or cold science. It's a story woven with dark secrets, veiled in shame, and sealed by generations of silence. Tonight, you're going to step into a hidden chapter of history that reveals how deep the roots of desperation, isolation, and forbidden bloodlines can grow. The woman, barely known beyond her dusty front porch, carried a burden heavier than most could imagine. She lived in a community so insular, so detached from the outside world, that outsiders rarely passed through. And if they did, they never stayed long. Her pregnancy wasn't just a secret. It was a mystery that confounded even the closest neighbors. No man claimed the child, and the whispers that followed her were more chilling than comforting. Some said the child was a curse, others that it was a dark consequence of long-buried sins. But what was undeniable was the weight of her isolation, a shadow growing thicker with each passing day. No hospital records, no official papers. This child was born in secrecy, a product of a tangled web of bloodlines that intertwined so closely it defied normal understanding. The community itself was a powder keg of genetic history, a place where cousins, siblings, and distant relatives often found their lives crossing in ways the outside world would never accept. Yet, it wasn't just the inbreeding that shocked those who eventually learned the truth. It was the deliberate, almost ritualistic nature of it. This wasn't happenstance. It was the desperate preservation of a bloodline so twisted no one dared speak of it. But the story does not begin with the woman or her child. It begins generations before with the slow decay of a family once proud and powerful, now fallen into secrecy and madness. Their legacy became a prison, a claustrophobic nightmare where love was twisted into something unrecognizable and survival demanded sacrifices most wouldn't fathom. To understand the child's birth, you have to understand the haunting legacy that preceded her. The dark halls of this family's history are filled with whispers of madness, violence, and betrayal. What happened next would push the boundaries of belief and force us to confront truths too terrible to name. This is a story not only about blood and bones, but about the shadows cast by silence, about the cost of secrets buried beneath the American soil. Secrets that once unearthed cannot be ignored. Tonight, you will witness the unraveling of a nightmare that was hidden in plain sight. The story of a child born from the most inbred lineage ever recorded. A child who carries with her the weight of an entire community's darkest shame. Prepare yourself to delve deeper into this chilling legacy. The family name had once meant something. In faded letters on rusted iron gates, it still lingered, a reminder of a time when the land they owned stretched across the hills like a kingdom, but kingdoms fall. And this one didn't go down in fire or war. It rotted from within. The patriarch, a man whose photograph still hung crooked in the hallway of the crumbling estate, believed in purity, not spiritual purity, not moral purity, blood purity. To him, lineage wasn't just a matter of pride. It was a weapon, a shield, and eventually a curse. He married his cousin. So did his sons, and their sons. By the time the woman in our story was born, the family tree had twisted into something grotesque, not branching out, but curling inward like a dying vine, choking itself. The town knew, of course, they knew, but in places like this, silence is safer than truth. The people nearby kept their distance. They didn't talk to the family, they didn't visit the home, and they definitely didn't ask questions. The woman's mother had never spoken a full sentence to anyone outside the property line. She was often seen walking the field alone, barefoot in the frost, humming tuneless melodies that seemed older than language. When she died quietly without fanfare, the daughter didn't cry. She simply took her place like it was preordained. Same walk, same silence, same broken gaze that looked past you, not at you. But something had changed in this generation. Not visibly, not at first. You wouldn't know it by looking at her, but deep in her blood, something ancient and wrong had begun to unravel. The product of generation after generation of genetic collapse was no longer just physical. It had become psychological. What was once hidden now whispered from inside. And when she became pregnant, no one asked. Not the sheriff, not the neighbors, not even the midwife who showed up with 2 trembling hands the night the child was born. They all knew better. They knew that asking meant knowing, and knowing meant you carried a piece of it with you forever. So they pretended. They told themselves maybe it was an outsider, a drifter, a mistake. But in their bones they knew there was no outsider. There never had been, because that family hadn't let new blood in for over 100 years, and the child she carried, that child wasn't the beginning of something new. It was the final echo of something terrible that should have ended long ago. The child was born in the back room of a house with no electricity, no running water, and no mirrors. The walls were stained with smoke and time, and the air felt heavier than it should have. No one in town ever saw the baby. Not in daylight, not in passing. It was as if the child didn't exist. A rumor wrapped in silence, but every so often you'd hear it. A noise that didn't sound quite right. Not a cry, not a coop, something between a gasp and a gurgle, like the world itself wasn't sure what to make of the thing that had entered it. The midwife who delivered the child never returned. She left the property pale and shaking, mumbling about a face that wasn't finished. When pressed, she refused to say more, just stared off into the woods until someone took her hand and led her away. She stopped practicing after that, moved 2 towns over, and never answered questions again. It's easy to dismiss stories like this, to call them exaggerations or small-town superstition, but medical records do exist. One photocopy found in a state archive misfiled under a different surname describes the child as having extreme craniofacial abnormalities, asymmetrical limb development, and a suspected cognitive incapacity beyond standard classification. But the most disturbing detail wasn't what was written. It was what was scratched out. Whole lines redacted in pen, as if someone thought knowing the full truth might be dangerous. And maybe they were right. Children born from severe inbreeding often suffer from genetic disorders. This is a biological reality. But in this case, it wasn't just the child's appearance that disturbed those who encountered her. It was her presence. Something about her made people nervous, unsettled, as if she was absorbing the room without moving. There were no tantrums, no outbursts, just watching, always watching. One visitor swore she saw the G mimic her every blink, every breath, not out of curiosity, but like she was studying her prey. And still the townspeople stayed silent. They told themselves it wasn't their problem, that the family was cursed. Yes, but contained like rot inside a wall. As long as no one touched it, maybe it wouldn't spread. But secrets like this don't stay buried, especially when they've grown teeth. The child was growing, and soon keeping her hidden would no longer be enough. As the girl grew older, the house seemed to sink deeper into the earth. Not literally, but in the way that abandoned places do when something unnatural lives inside. The windows were always covered. The doors sealed tight with old chains and rusted locks. Not to keep danger out, but to keep something in. No one dared to walk the path past the property anymore. Even hunters, men who feared nothing in the woods, began avoiding the area. They said the trees near the house stopped growing right. Bark split open in strange patterns. Animals gave the land a wide berth. The forest itself recoiled, but it was the girl who disturbed the most. She never enrolled in school, never appeared at town events. Yet people reported seeing her at night, standing just beyond the tree line, staring toward the town with eyes too wide, too still. One couple swore she was barefoot in the snow, not shivering, just waiting. When they blinked, she was gone. She didn't speak, not in any way that people understood. But the sounds she made, low murmurs, rhythmic hums, animal-like clicking, had a pattern to them. Some said it sounded like a language. Others said it was mimicry, an echo of the voices she had heard through the walls all her life. Either way, the result was the same: unease, even terror. There were stories that the mother had tried to run once, that she'd taken the child into town and begged a doctor for help. But the doctor, after one glance, locked his office and told her never to return. He died 2 months later. Stroke, they said, but some swear he wasn't the same after that day. Couldn't sleep, kept muttering about too much of the same blood in one body. If you're still watching, you're already braver than most. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done if this was your bloodline? The town eventually reached a silent agreement. They wouldn't go near the house, wouldn't call authorities, wouldn't ask questions, and in return they hoped whatever lived inside would stay put. But when something is born from a century of silence, shame, and decay, it doesn't just stay hidden. It furs, it waits, and one day it learns how to open the door. It happened on a Sunday, the kind of day when the town should have felt safe. Church bells rang, children laughed, windows were opened to let the breeze in, but at precisely 2:17 p.m., the bell tower stopped mid-chime. No wind, no bird song, just silence so sudden it made the hair on your neck stand up. That's when people say they saw her. She walked down the center of the road barefoot, her hands hanging limp at her sides, fingers twitching like they were being moved by someone else. Her head tilted slightly, like she was listening to something far away, or maybe inside herself. Her face was obscured by long black hair, but those who saw her swore she was smiling, not with her mouth, with her eyes. She didn't knock, didn't scream. She simply stood in front of the town's only grocery store and stared through the glass. A boy inside dropped his candy and ran. An older woman crossed herself and whispered, "That's not a child. That's something else wearing a child's skin." The sheriff arrived minutes later. He stepped out of his car slowly, hand resting on his holster. He asked her name. She didn't answer, just tilted her head again. He said he'd take her home, even offered her a ride. But when he reached for her arm, she let out a sound that no one can quite describe. Not a scream, not a growl, something deeper, primal. It rattled the windows and dropped the sheriff to his knees. When he looked up, she was gone. She had vanished, not into the woods, not behind a building, just gone. After that, something changed in town. Lights began to flicker. Livestock were found mutilated with no blood, no tracks. Children started sleepwalking, waking in the middle of fields with no memory of how they got there. One boy drew a picture at school. A girl with black eyes standing in front of a burning house. When asked who it was, he said, "My sister." He was an only child. The mother, no one saw her again. Some say she died. Others say she's still in the house, locked in a room she can't escape from, whispering prayers that have no God to hear them. Whatever the truth, it no longer mattered. The girl wasn't a secret anymore. She was part of the town now, woven into its silence, its shame. A living curse born not from evil, but from decades of inbreeding, fear, and willful blindness. And something tells me she was only getting started. The town tried to erase her, as if scrubbing history could undo blood. The sheriff's report disappeared. Local papers never mentioned the incident. The store installed new glass and painted over the cracks. Parents told their children it was just a strange dream, that there was no girl, no scream, no shadow walking down the road. But the land remembered. Old barns collapsed without warning, wells turned sour, crops failed. The town preacher lost his voice midsman and never spoke again. He later carved a single word into the church pew before vanishing entirely. Returned. No one wanted to say it out loud, but they all knew what it meant. She hadn't just come to town, she had come back. And the bloodline that spawned her, the one everyone had quietly condemned but never confronted, had bled into their soil, their minds, their children. Because that's the thing about inbreeding in a closed community. It's not just physical, it's psychological. It breeds patterns, habits, silence passed down like a family heirloom. Over time, no one remembers where the sickness started, only that it must be kept hidden. And so it grows. There were rumors now. Some said she could speak, but only in backward whispers, that she'd been seen near the schoolhouse at night, drawing circles into the dirt with her fingers. A teacher swore she found one of those circles carved into her classroom floor, though she had locked the door the night before. No signs of a break-in, just that perfect circle, and a single handprint too small to belong to any child currently enrolled. People began moving away. Those who stayed avoided mirrors and doorways after dark. They said they felt watched, not from outside, but from inside their homes. Dreams turned violent, night terrors. A farmer burned his own fields claiming the girl had walked through them, and the wheat had bowed to her and throughs. All of this, the house, the original house, the place where it all began, remained untouched. The doors were shut, the chains still in place, but neighbors noticed something strange. The lights were always on now, and yet there was no power line connecting it to the grid. Whatever had been locked away inside that house for generations wasn't alone anymore. It had taken form. It had learned to walk, to look back, to remind the town and the world that you cannot bury a sin that deep and expected not to grow. The final chapter of this story isn't written in books or police files. It lives in the mouths of those who speak of her only in whispers, if they speak at all. Most don't, most have left. The town today is little more than a husk, overgrown and forgotten, with broken roads that lead nowhere, and signs so rusted they no longer bear names. The house still stands, and so does she. Those who have dared return. Urban explorers, thrill-seekers, the kind who mock what they don't understand, come back different. The lucky ones never find the house. Their cameras glitch, batteries die, compasses spin. They wander in circles and leave frustrated. But the unlucky ones, they find her. There's footage, a single clip that surfaced online before being wiped. Less than a minute long, just static, then the shape of a girl at the end of a hallway. Pale, unmoving, head tilted sideways. Then the sound, that same low hum the midwife once heard. Those who watched it claimed to hear it hours afterward, echoing in their homes, inside their heads. One man clawed out his own ears. He's still institutionalized, but here's the part they never tell you. The girl isn't alone anymore. Inbreeding does something to a mind, especially across generations. It blurs boundaries, not just of blood, but of self. Her family didn't just collapse inward genetically. They became one thing, a singular thought stretched across multiple bodies like roots from the same poison tree. And the girl, she is the last fruit of that tree, but inside her are all of them. The mother, the mother's father, his brother, and the others before them going back generations. That's why her eyes don't blink like a child's. That's why her silence weighs more than any scream. She carries voices that were never supposed to meet, thoughts that never had space between them. She is the curse, the punishment, the proof. There is no known name for her, no record, no birth certificate. But in that town, if you can still call it a town, they have a name. They call her the Echo Child because she doesn't speak for herself. She speaks for all of them. Every secret, every sin, every wrong buried beneath generations of silence and shame. And if you ever hear that low humming in the distance, don't look back. Don't investigate. Don't open the door. Because some bloodlines were never meant to survive. And this one should never have been born at all.